Welcome to Whiskey Cast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 975 for October 23rd, 2022. I'm on the road this week in Dublin, Ireland, and coming up in a few minutes.
People talk about the renaissance of Irish whiskey and where are, well, I 22 years into it, I still think we're at the start of the renaissance. Really, the foundation has been laid.
Bernard Walsh has seen a lot over his 22 years in the Irish whiskey industry, and the Walsh Whiskey Company founder will share his takes on the state of the industry on this week's Whiskey Cast in Depth. That's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Your Voice, and on Behind the Label.
Barkeepers started to actually mint their own coins with an individual insignia or mark to delineate, hey, this is my coin for my bar.
The news is next on this week's Whiskey Cast.
Gabriel Cardarella here with Dewar's Whiskey, inviting you to enjoy this episode of Whiskey Cast with a glass of Dewar's, the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in history.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of Whiskey Cast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. I almost hesitate to mention the situation in the UK right now, since it's changing from day to day as we speak. First off, the freeze in excise duty on whiskey and other distilled spirits announced several weeks ago by then-Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has now been reversed. This week's Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, plans to impose the previously scheduled tax hike in line with inflation next February, assuming he's still in office. He reversed a whole bunch of tax cuts supported by Kwarteng and now former Prime Minister Liz Truss, who stepped down this week after just 6 weeks on the job. Her replacement will be named this Friday, and it could mean a return to 10 Downing Street for Boris Johnson, who's in the running to become Prime Minister again, along with former Chancellor Rishi Sunak. As for the reversal of the tax cuts, it made the markets happy, but not the whiskey industry, which blasted the move as hurting competitiveness. Ardbeg is in the hotel business now. The Glenmorangie Company has acquired the Isla Hotel in Port Ellen. There's no word on the purchase price, but company executives say they plan to create a world-class whiskey and hospitality experience on the island. No changes will be seen for a while, as they want to spend some time operating the hotel before confirming any changes. The hotel already has a world-class whiskey bar, but look for it to have an even larger selection of Ardbegs than before. New whiskeys to mention this week. Jameson has released its first single pot still whiskey in decades. The Jameson single pot still goes back to the days when Jameson always was a single pot still whiskey before it became a blended whiskey. The new Jameson pot still is available in Ireland, the UK, and limited export markets for €60 a bottle. Powerscourt Distillery has 2 new whiskeys out. For Cullen 21-year-old is a single malt using vintage Cooley whiskey finished in PX and Oloroso sherry casks and sells for €225 a bottle. Meanwhile, for Cullen Falls is the distillery's first release using its own single malt whiskey blended with sourced grain whiskey. It sells for €38 a bottle. I'll have tasting notes for both of them soon at the WhiskeyCast website. Aberfeldy is out with a new 18-year-old Tuscan red wine cask finished single malt scotch. It's the 4th release in Aberfeldy's red wine cask collection. There's no word on pricing. Kentucky's Jephthah Creed Distillery is coming out with a new red, white, and blue bourbon next month. And the colors aren't just because part of the profits will go to Kentucky's Veterans Club. It's made with 3 different types of heirloom corn: Bloody Butcher red corn, heirloom white, and Bruce's blue corn. It goes on sale November 11th at the distillery and at selected Kentucky and Indiana retailers for $75 a bottle. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and on our social media timelines. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from Whiskey Cast.
Time now for the Whiskey Cast calendar of events brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. Lots going on this week, including Whiskeys of the World in Atlanta on the 29th and the Dornoch Whiskey Festival all this coming weekend. Fine and Rare in New York City has a Compass Box tasting with John Glazer on November 1st. Whiskey Fest New York is on the 3rd, and the Mozambique Wine and Whiskey Festival is November 3rd through the 5th in Maputo. Fred Minnick has a blind bourbon live tasting at Nationals Park in Washington, D.C. on the 10th. Bourbon and Barbecue is in Louisville, Kentucky on the 11th and 12th. And I hope you can join me in Fredericton, New Brunswick for the New Brunswick Spirits Festival. It runs from November 15th through the 19th. If you're organizing a whiskey event, please let us know about it, and we'll add it to the searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. The calendar is brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states, 3 continents, and online. Visit the new BuyVirginiaRye.com site for more details, and please drink responsibly.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. 2 homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of Whiskey Cast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Whiskey Cast In Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Once again, I'm in Ireland this week on a trip organized by the Irish Whiskey Association and Tourism Ireland, and it's a chance to catch up with our old friend Bernard Walsh of Walsh Whiskey Company. Since we last heard from Bernard in the pre-pandemic days, he has sold the company to Amber Beverage Group, but stayed on to run it after the sale. He's a former chairman of the Irish Whiskey Association and remains on the group's board of directors. All that and his 22 years in the industry make him a good person to explain the state of Irish whiskey today. We sat down over drinks at Dublin's Westbury Hotel. First of all, give me a sense of where the Irish whiskey industry sits right now in 2022.
Mark, lovely to be here with you. People talk about the renaissance of Irish whiskey, and where are 22 years into it, I still think we're at the start of the renaissance. Really, the foundation has been laid, and it's a rock solid foundation. We've gone from 3 distilleries when we started out to about 40 plus now. It's been an incredible journey, but I really see the things really only kicking in now, because a lot of the whiskey and liquid that's been laid down over the past 10 years in particular is only starting to come into its own now. There's a lot of experimentation, and it's really only starting. So we all know Irish whiskey, along with other whiskey categories, they've been doing well. Maybe for us, we see maybe the Irish outperforming the global whiskey category, and it probably should do, because it's come from a long way back and it's got a long way to run. So maybe we're not at the start of the renaissance, but we're certainly, we've a long way to go.
Along with that comes the increase in tourism that we've seen with those 40-plus distilleries, many of them dependent on tourism now, right?
Yes, and from a cash flow point of view, they're looking at, well, how do we get some cash in while we lay down barrels? And we really don't want to be touching them for the first 5 years at minimum. So tourism goes a long way to helping. And many of these distilleries are in rural Ireland. They're not in O'Connell Street, Dublin. There's a few in the centre of Dublin, but most are not. And it's just and whiskey is really suited to the regions of Ireland. You can go to the highest valley, the lowest valley, the highest mountain. You'll find a distillery out there, and tourism is essential for them to not just cash, but also get their message out, and for the visitor to take brand in hand back to North America, back to Europe, and spread the message that there's something happening in Ireland.
There's a lot happening here with reports of distilleries being up for sale. I won't get into any specific names because all that's been rumored, but you made the decision to sell Walsh Whiskey to Amber Beverage Group several months ago. How's that going, and why did you make the decision to sell?
Listen, for us it's 22 plus years on the road. We started at a time when nothing was happening with Irish whiskey. Nobody was asking for another Irish whiskey. So it's been an incredible journey, and we probably don't have enough time to go into all the highs and lows. But there's certainly one book in there, if not maybe two. Really enjoyable for us. We got to achieve a hell of a lot in that relatively short space of time. In whiskey history, it's short. In our lifetime, maybe a wee bit longer. But getting to build our distillery was a huge, moment of pride for us. The opening, the first distillate coming down. So very proud of all of that. And then our two babies, Riders' Tears and the Irishman. To see them flourish in over 50 markets across the world, to be number one Irish super premium whiskey in Canada, you're very, very proud of these achievements for ourselves. The approach from Amber came left field. We were really, we were back as an independent Walsh Whiskey. We were making great strides. We've grown the business since our, separation from our joint venture with Ilva. We've grown the business over 40% in those 2.5 short years. But we did catch the eye, I suppose, of a few. Amber fell in love with Riders' Tears and the Irishman. They loved our brands. They came to us. After coming out of one partnership, we were not interested in going back into another. We were set. We knew what we wanted to do, but they were persistent, and the offer they put in front of us was super. Everybody in the company got to enjoy the spoils of that, and it was, for the first time in 22 years, to be able to take some money off the table was incredible. Little did I know that they wanted me to stay on. They, hands up, said, listen, we're not whiskey people, we're tequila people, we're gin people, we're vodka people. We're not whiskey people yet. Would you stay on? So they've asked me to stay on, and I'm really relishing and enjoying the freedom that they've given me. They're very entrepreneurial, they're very ambitious. They want to do a lot in whiskey, not just Irish whiskey, but beyond that. So I'm going to do my best to help them and the team here in Ireland. So we're really enjoying the run that they've given us.
When you look at the market and we see reports that distilleries are up for sale, does that concern you at all?
No, I see it very much as the growing pains. I said at the beginning, this is the start of the Renaissance, rather the middle or the end of the Renaissance for Irish whiskey. So critical to the Renaissance was the proliferation of new distilleries, new brands, diversification, broadening out the taste profile for Irish whiskey. So all these, especially the smaller distilleries, are really important in stretching what Irish whiskey should be and challenging. But it's the natural ebb and flow of business. There are some that will come under pressure for financial reasons, and that's understandable. There are others who will maybe reach a natural conclusion in their project and want to move on. And then we have all the big drinks players now see Irish whiskey as a must-have. They all want an Irish whiskey distillery or whiskey brand in their portfolio, as Amber Beverage came looking for us. So there are quite a few of these firms here knocking on doors, and there will be a significant consolidation in the next 18 months, and then that will get us ready for the next leg of the journey. So I see this as it's necessary. And it's part of the growing pains of the industry. But all these small distilleries that have set up over the past, especially 10 years, are critical for the future of Irish whiskey.
You mentioned the big players coming in. We had Sazerac coming in, buying the distillery up in Sligo. You have William Grant & Sons with Tullamore, Diageo with Roe & Co. now. What's available or what's possible out there in the marketplace for somebody that wanted to come in?
So when you say what's possible,
in terms of acquisitions?
Well, there are, at least 10 distilleries that I know of that could be acquired in the morning for the right deal, etc., etc. There are, a lot of distilleries have been set up in the past 10 years where I know it's taken a lot of funds. Number one, to build. Number two, to lay down. And now they've got 5 and 6 year old whiskey maturing. You've got to be out there. You've got to have route to market, and this is the big challenge for a lot of the smaller players, is route to market. We'll wear the shoe leather. We'll get out there and do our best, but the big international drinks firms, they have route to market sewn up. So for some sort of partnership there, that's the real joy. The smaller player, we're quick on our feet, we're innovative, we are creative, but we do need help when it comes to route to market, and that is the critical linchpin in the whole thing.
I keep saying that any distillery is up for sale if the price is right, so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And what I love in the whiskey industry, that most of us are getting into it for the love of it. We really love what we do, but you put in years of hard work. You do need paid back at some stage, and especially for your long-suffering family who've probably journeyed with you. It's lovely that everybody gets a payout at some stage, and then to see, in our case, our brands bought by a large international drinks firm who've got route to market in 175 markets. For me to go to Japan and see our Riders Tears or Irishman on the shelf fills me with pride. To go to India to see, in Mumbai to see a bottle of Riders Tears, these are things that we would have probably struggled with.
Speaking of struggles, how are you guys coping with supply chain issues? I know it's affecting distillers right and left, large and small.
That's a big question. Probably needs a lot of time to answer, but it's always been a challenge. It's an even bigger challenge now. It was a huge challenge through COVID, and we all doubled down and loaded up on bottles, corks. So we have a year's worth of corks, a year's worth of bottles. This brings storage issues. Carrying, the costs of goods. We've got more, probably 3-4 months worth of finished goods, more than we normally used to carry. It does weigh heavily on any company. So we are all very innovative in trying to get bottles and caps and making sure everything is in place, but at the moment, the world is in turmoil, and I see no end to it in the near future. We've got to knuckle down and just strap ourselves in. This is tough.
If you wanted to launch a new Riders Tears expression today, how soon could you do it?
If I wanted to launch today is when the concept starts. We're thinking about the liquid, the whiskey. Is it a new make that we're going to put away for 5-6 years? What casks, etc., etc. It can take an age. So it depends if it's something that we do every year, and you'll be very familiar with Dick Max down in Dingle. We love those guys down there, make super beer, and we have a collaboration with them every year where we take we'll send down a cask, they'll put one of their special brews in it, we'll take it back. It's a great, so that's all within 12-month period we do this. So 12 months is the minimum for a simple one cask collaboration with a cask that will not leave this island. The end produce will not leave this island. So whiskey is a long-term business. It's a long-term game. You cannot do anything short-term here.
The question I may not have worded it properly, but I know that, say, if somebody wants to launch a new SKU now, it would take them 6 months to get the bottles, 6 months to get the labels printed, things like that, just because of supply chain issues.
It's a minimum 12 months. It's because of supply. It's a minimum 12 months. So we're now working on bottles, labels, design work for 2024. Now here we are in the fall of 2022.
How worried are you about the global economic crunch that many see coming with the inflation, with energy prices, with costs for everything going up? Are you worried that people might stop spending money on luxury items like whiskey?
Of course, there is always that possibility. I don't worry, though, because in my 22 years we've been through many crises, whether it was the crash of 08, 09, the Crimea War in 2014, the Brexit. Let's not forget about Trump and Boris Johnson. Many people have upset our world, but it doesn't worry me. I see in times of hard times, people do like to trade up and treat themselves with affordable luxuries. A bottle of whiskey, it can be affordable. A nice bottle of whiskey can be affordable, and maybe they drink less, but they're going to drink a good bottle every so often. And we've seen that, I would say, in every downturn in the past 22 years.
Thanks to Bernard Walsh for spending some time with us on this week's Whiskey Cast In Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's begin with the Dubliner Bourbon Cask from the Dublin Liberties Distillery. It's bottled at 40% ABV, and while the distillery's own single malt whiskey will be blended into this one starting next year, it's currently made using sourced single malt and grain whiskeys. The nose is very sweet with touches of honey, butterscotch, and caramel candies. The taste is sweet and approachable with a hint of red apples, balanced by honey, caramel, and butterscotch notes. It's very consistent with a finish that's medium length and sweet. I'm scoring the Dubliner Bourbon Cask an 89. The Bushmills Caribbean Rum Cask finish was one of the last whiskeys Helen Mulholland created before she retired from Bushmills earlier this year. The single malt whiskey in the blend was finished in rum casks before it was blended with grain whiskey. This one is also bottled at 40% ABV, and the nose has touches of toffee and molasses, along with hints of stone fruits and subtle spices. The taste is fruity and well-balanced with hints of spice, molasses, and brown sugar. The finish, long and sweet with a hint of dry spices, and I'm scoring the Bushmills Caribbean Rum Cask finish a 90. Finally, the team at Roe & Co. joined forces with their colleagues at Dublin's Guinness Open Gate Brewery across the street to create a coffee stout cask-finished Irish whiskey. The Cask and Keg edition is bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has notes of roasted coffee beans, fresh fruits, butterscotch, honey, and toasted oak. The taste is well balanced with hints of coffee, cinnamon, clove, fresh fruits, toasted oak, and honey, while the finish is long with subtle spices and a hint of coffee beans. I'm scoring the Roe & Co. Cask and Keg edition a 92. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,400 different whiskeys at whiskycast.com. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 100-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature, double oak, cask strength, or reserve series of ryes, as well as their line of premium rye whiskey canned cocktails at a retailer near you. Just visit sagamorespirit.com/find-rye. Please drink responsibly.
Dewar's master blender Stephanie McLeod's innate curiosity, combined with her passion for whiskey maturation, cask finishing and blending has created some truly incredible expressions for Dewar's Scotch whiskey. It's also earned her 4 consecutive Master Blender of the Year titles at the International Whiskey Competition, making her the first person to achieve such an accolade. Her innovative spirit is the inspiration behind the ultra-premium Dewar's Double Double 32 Year, the highest-rated blended Scotch whiskey in the world with a score of 94.4. So whether you consider yourself a whiskey connoisseur or just want to find an exciting new whiskey experience, consider one of Stephanie's other masterful expressions, including Dewar's 15-year, Double Double 21-year, or Dewar's 8-year Mizunara cask finish, and discover just how rewarding curiosity can be. Enjoy responsibly.
Let's open up the inbox now for Your Voice, presented by Scarabaus Islay Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Had some fun on Twitter this week with Halloween coming up in a few days. What whiskey goes best with Halloween? Booker's, of course. I tweeted that out. And, of course, a bunch of you chimed in with your own ideas. From Chris Ratcliffe, for those Scotch drinkers who trick and treat, Lagavulin. From @Weasel32, the best fictional whiskey is Glengoolie from Archer, of course. Pete at Whiskey Ranked responded to that with, I heard there's a lot of Bunnahabhain in that blend. From @Whiskey Craig, Jim Scream Shirley. On a similar vein from Dolph Shaw, Scream Suntory. But perhaps the best response came from @Mark S. Brownstein, MGP. It's always disguised as someone else. Ooh, that'll hurt someone. If you have a question, suggestion, or anything else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always find me on social media. Look for WhiskeyCast on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or just email me. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Scarabaus, the Islay single malt from Hunter Lang & Company that celebrates all of Islay's natural gifts in one bottle. Only those who seek shall find Scarabaus. Start your search at hunterlang.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. What's behind the name of a whiskey? Well, sometimes there's a legend, sometimes a true story. In the case of Keeper's Coin whiskey from the Dublin Liberties Distillery, it's the latter. The Liberties was historically Dublin's, shall we say, most raucous part of the city back in the day. It was outside the city's walls, and laws just weren't enforced, leading to all of the things you might expect in such a place. Bartenders in the Liberties had a practice of minting their own coins, as the DLD's Stephanie Shen tells us.
The Keeper's Coins actually comes from a couple of coins that were found in Christchurch Cathedral, which is our largest cathedral in Ireland, when they were doing renovations. And so essentially what they would do is during the 1700s, they would actually rent out the crypts underneath the cathedral. So if you had money, you could rent it out and you could build a little bar there. You could do kind of whatever you wanted there. What bars would do at that time is they would actually have their own casks. So they would have their own casks for whiskey, they would have their own casks for beer, and if you really, really liked a bar, you would keep going to that bar because it would have a really unique liquid. And so barkeepers started to actually mint their own coins with an individual insignia or mark to delineate, hey, this is my coin for my bar. So it was great for the consumer because if you really liked a whiskey, you could figure out where this mark had come from and you could go back to that bar and be like, yes, great, I found my favourite whiskey. But it also worked for the guys running the bars, because if you give customers change in your marked coins, they wouldn't generally be accepted in other bars. So it was a way to almost ensure consumer loyalty, because if you've got a coin that you can't use anywhere else, of course you're going to keep going back to this bar to drink their whiskey and drink their beer.
One of the distillery's other whiskeys is named Murder Lane. You can guess what that particular part of the Liberties was famous for. You'll find my tasting notes for both whiskeys in the tasting notes section at whiskycast.com. And if you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copperpot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
That's all for this edition of Whiskey Cast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskeycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and of course a complete archive of all of our past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Thanks to the Irish Whiskey Association and Tourism Ireland for making this week's podcast from Ireland possible. As always, full editorial control remains with WhiskeyCast. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskeyCast. The email address is comments@whiskeycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
A thoughtful gift is hard work. What you need is a go-to multi-purpose gift for all occasions. A bottle of Redbreast can say, "Enjoy every minute, they grow up so fast." Oh. And equally nails, "Apologies for the back pain, I should have just hired a moving company."
Proud sponsor of WhiskeyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Well, folks, we're nearing the end of another great episode of WhiskeyCast, which means you're probably craving some whiskey. Head on over to Dewar's.com or your local retailer to discover what makes Dewar's the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in the world.
WhiskeyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022, and usually comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.